All the things. I read 12 books, right? I don't know. I feel like it's hard to explain. And but her curiosity. And I've said it before, I will keep saying it again. So there are bodies showing up, and they are... Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to part 2 of what I read in January. So if you guys have followed me on Instagram, you know I had a really great reading month in January, and I read a whole bunch of books, and I've read a whole bunch of audiobooks, and I read a whole bunch of new books, and I just had like the best reading start to the new year. I don't even know how to explain it. So if you are like, I don't know how to explain why, like sometimes I feel like, I don't know, the stars align and you just pick the right books and they just resonate. So anyway, all that to say, if you missed part 1, I will link it for you down below so you can see that. And today we're going to talk about the rest of the books that I read this month, obviously. So to quickly recap the first video, maybe to entice you to go and check it out if you haven't, I read The Last Party by Claire McIntosh. That was my first book of the year. It opens on New Year's Day when a dead body is found, and I intentionally wanted to read it starting it on New Year's Day because I thought that would be fun. So anyway, read that. Then I read All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham, Everyone in My Family is a Killer by Benjamin Stevenson, The Villa by Rachel Hawkins, The House in the Pines by Anna Reyes, and then A Quiet Retreat by Kristen Moglin. And I, sidebar, had never read a Kristen Moglin. I keep saying her name wrong. And then I was like, oh, I hope she wrote something else I can dig into. She's written like 30 something books. So I just finished another one of her books in February. So I think she's going to become like a new favorite bingeable, thrillery, dark and messed up author for me. But one more time, let's talk about everything else I read in January. So the first book I want to talk about is one that I feel like is very buzzy, and it's The Housewife by Frida McFadden. So the sequel to this book is coming out shortly, The Housemaid's Secret, which I'm super excited about. So I talked about that in my February new release video, and I am going to immediately pick that book up. That's how much I loved this book. So this is one of those books where I feel like there was a bunch of buzz about it and everyone talked about how bingeable it was, and I was kind of intrigued, and then I just sort of drifted, and then I was re-intrigued, and I'm so excited that I read this. I loved this book, you guys. Like 5-star bingeable, totally messed up, and I just loved everything about it. So let me give you the premise first before I share some sort of quasi-cryptic thoughts about the book. So in this book, we are following Millie, and she applies to be the housemaid for the very rich and fancy Winchester family out on Long Island. So it is Nina is the wife, her husband Andy, and then their daughter Cecilia. And Millie is literally living in her car, super desperate. And when she gets this job, she's just over the moon. So Millie has some stuff in her past, of course, and she basically winds up moving in with this family, and it's like this beautiful mansion of a house, but she gets to live in this room in the attic, which is like basically a storage closet, and there's one window that faces the backyard that's painted shut, and it's like not, I think there's like exposed light bulbs and stuff, but meanwhile the rest of the house is like to the nines. But again, she's living in her car and she's super desperate, so she's totally fine to do it. So every day she cleans their house top to bottom, she picks up their daughter, she cooks for them. And it says, I try to ignore how Nina makes a mess just to watch me clean it up. How she tells strange lies about her own daughter, and how her husband, Andrew, seems more broken every day. But as I look into Andrew's handsome brown eyes, so full of pain, it's hard not to imagine what it would be like to live Nina's life. The walk-in closet, the fancy car, the perfect husband. So because of Millie's desperation, she will basically put up with anything to stay in this house and to keep this job. And Nina just seems determined to just like push her to the edge. So we start to get all sorts of just dark and messed up behavior going on here, which I absolutely love. You guys know. And I just really enjoyed this book. So I feel like you just kind of like gotta go into it dark. This is one of those books where on the opening page, we know that the police are there is a body, and that something really terrible has gone down, and then we go backwards in time. So This book reminded me of another book, and I was going to do a whole read-alike, and then I realized doing that, this is where I'm going to be super cryptic, is going to give, I think, too much away. So this is a book that I read and absolutely loved, the other one that I'm talking about. And I feel like if you've read this, maybe you know, feel free to email me or like DM me on Instagram. Don't put it down below because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But while I like loved that original book, I have to say, and this is not me saying it's a copycat or it's nothing like that, but it's more of like I was reminded of another book, hence the read-alike. But I actually really love how this book ended and what Frida McFadden did with these characters and the choices that were made. I thought were just really amazing, and I totally loved it. So if you can see, I dog-eared all the pages. You can see my creepy eye, like this creepy eye. Fix this here. But I just thought it was so great. And it was similar in the feeling to another book that I'm going to talk about, in that it went like so much darker and more messed up than I thought it was going to. And it was a super fast read. Again, like crazy bingeable. I read it in a couple of days. This was one of those books that I just like couldn't wait to get back to. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it so much. So if you're looking for just like a bingeable, perfectly messed up thriller with just very morally gray, dark, and messed up characters, I think this is a great one to pick up. So 3 cheers for this. I loved the twists and turns. I loved the reveals. I thought it was just really amazing. And I am a huge fan. I also have The Locked Door by Frida McFadden, which I'm excited to read. But yes, 1000% going to pick up The Handmaid's Secret. Housemaid. I keep wanting to say Handmaid like Handmaid's Tale, and I keep having to look. Housemaid's Secret, which comes out in February. And you're seeing this in February, so it'll be out soon. I'll include the date down below. The next book I want to talk about is The Butcher and the Wren, and this is by Elena Urquhart. So she is the co-host of the Morbid True Crime Podcast. You guys know I love me a true crime podcast and a podcast, period. And I love dark and messed up books and serial killers and medical examiners, and this book has it all. So this is one of those books where it was like low-key on my radar, and then Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library read it last year, and I was like, all right, Lindsay really enjoyed this book. I need to pick it up. And then I just sort of, I feel like this always happens. Like once something is in your line of view, and then I started hearing about it everywhere. So this is like a super short book, as the cover falls off of it. And there's so much packed into this. And I'm just amazed by these authors as someone who is an extreme overwriter, who can be super succinct and just get so much packed into a book. So in this one, we are following a medical examiner named Wren. So that's the Wren in The Butcher and the Wren. And she is helping to catch this methodical serial killer. So she is the medical examiner. This is set in Louisiana. This book gives great atmosphere. I am not, I was going to say I'm not someone who's been to Louisiana. Weirdest way to say something. I've never been to Louisiana, but the atmosphere, the setting, it reminds me of Stacey Willingham, how they, like, she really nails her settings in the books. Like I felt like I was there. You could feel the bayou and the swamp and just like the stickiness and all of that. I think she did an amazing job creating this atmosphere and this image of what everything was like and how it smelled and how it felt. Like just such a talent in creating that. So we are following Wren, like I said, who's the medical examiner, and she is working with the police. So bodies are showing up, they're getting more brutal, and they are trying to catch a killer. So this is one of those books where we get the POV from Wren, and we also get the POV from the serial killer, which reminds me of 13 by Steve Kavanaugh. And I'm sorry, this is like a super reflective cover. I 1000% had nightmares while I was reading this book, and I'm pretty sure this book is the reason why. So I didn't have nightmares of what happens in the book happening, but I had other just terrifying dreams while I was reading this. So I'm pretty sure this is why it happened. And I mean, not mad about it, kind of mad about it when it happened, but it was like that effective of a book I found, and he is a truly terrifying serial killer. I think she did a great job drawing him as a character and making him truly frightening. And I was frightened. Like, this is one of those books that I figured out in the few days that I read it, I could not read it at night. Like, it just was not something I could read at night. So Elena Urquhart herself is a autopsy technician. I want to get that right. She is, and you get such great I guess like details and insight about life in the morgue. So it very much reminded me in a lot of ways of the Patricia Cornwell Case Scarpetta series, the authenticity of the medical examiner's part of the investigation, and you can see her expertise in the book. So I really enjoyed this story. It wasn't absolutely perfect, but it definitely was very far up there. And I enjoyed these characters. I enjoyed spending time with them. There were a few things I had a couple questions, but again, I feel like it also kind of falls into that category of you can't be mad at a character for doing something that you think is different than what I would have done in a certain situation. So every once in a while I fall into that trap where I'm just like, no, that doesn't make sense. I would never do that. But I'm like, wait, I'm not her. So it doesn't matter what I would have done in a situation. And I also think it's really easy from the safety of my home to say what I would do in a situation when I'm not the person in the Deadly Serial Killer book. But I very much enjoyed this. So I am definitely going to read some deeper, darker stuff, or continue to read deeper, darker stuff. But anyway, long story short, if you have any curiosity about this book, I would highly recommend it because I thought it was great. But just know, for me, I found it kind of scary. I found it a lot scary. But like in that good, I want to be scared kind of a way. Okay, let's turn into something way lighter. I read Flying Solo by Linda Holmes. So I actually chiefly did the audiobook of this, which was read by one of my favorite people in the universe, Julia Whelan, and man, did she do a spectacular job, as always, on the audiobook. So Linda Holmes wrote Evie Drake is Starting Over, which I read when it came out a couple of years ago, and I absolutely loved it. So this book, for those who were fans of Evie, just a little bit of trivia to start you off, this is set in the same town. So you do get a passing reference to characters from that book. It's not a critical part in any sort of a way, but for me, it's always just a fun Easter egg when authors connect things. Like Jennifer Hillier sets all of her books in the same universe. And I feel like with the Dublin Murder Squad series, and again, I don't know why I keep doing hand motions, but I love when the authors kind of throw in those little treats for their readers. So anyway, just a nugget for anyone who read Evie. And a PSA, if you haven't read Evie Drake, you definitely should because it's amazing. But we're here to talk about Flying Solo. So this book definitely hit the spot for me. I picked this up when it came out and I just promptly put it on my shelf. But I feel like, again, as a mood reader, you got to roll with the mood. So this book is, I would say, like contemporary romance, but it's also, I need to find a phrase that I can coin for. We've got like a reluctant return home. It's sort of that starting over kind of, but assessing your life, where you are, someone who's at a pivotal, not even so much a change, but just sort of taking stock and sort of at a pivotal moment in their life. Which I need to find a more concise way of saying that. So in this book, we are following Lori Sasselin, and she is returning to her hometown in Maine. Her great aunt Dot passed away. She was 93 years old. She was Lori's like favorite aunt. She spent so much time with her when she was younger and growing up. And Dot is kind of, I feel like, what I would aspire to be. So she lived her life on her own terms. She never got married. She traveled. She took tons of pictures. She collected all of these mementos of her life, which are in her house. And she just was who she was, and she totally owned herself. And she just sounds like she would have been an absolutely amazing lady to hang out with and like super cool. And Lori is one of 4 children, and after Dot had passed away, kind of the family agreed Lori was going to be the one to go through her house. She has some flexibility with her job. She is a journalist, so she winds up coming to Maine for like a month to go through Dot's house. And she is sort of dealing with people that she can sell things to and sort of deciding what should go to the family. So while she is going through all of Dot's things, at the bottom of a cedar chest, she finds a wooden duck, which is like very carefully wrapped, like underneath a whole bunch of things, which in and of itself strikes her as a little bit strange. And then she finds a love letter to the never married Dot. And it ends with the line, quote, "And anyway, if you're ever desperate, there are always ducks, darling." So she is told that this duck has like absolutely no financial value at all. It's just a wooden duck. But then the duck disappears under suspicious circumstances, and Lori's curiosity is even more piqued. So I realized, like, when I read the synopsis of this, and even in the retelling of this, it sounds extremely strange, where you're like, why are we reading about a woman who finds a wooden duck at her aunt's house and it's like a thing? Just trust me. Just trust me. So more about Lori herself. So she is on the cusp of turning 40. A year ago, she canceled her wedding, broke up with her fiance, walked away from it. and she is living her best life on her own terms. And I feel like, as I say, it's like this pivot point, like turning 40, single woman, and she is back in her hometown. So she reconnects with her ex-boyfriend from high school, Nick Cooper, who runs the library and is by far probably one of my new favorite book crushes right now, and her best friend. And it's just all of them together. There's such love and friendship in this book and such deep connection between these people. But it's funny and it's lighthearted at times as well. And Laurie kind of ropes everyone into this duck caper, and everybody gets involved and everybody's trying to figure out what the secret is. And it just takes us on such a great journey. But what I love about this book, amongst so many other things that I loved about this book, but I feel like Linda Holmes' commentary on what it means to be happy, what it means to be successful, what it means to be in love, how love can look different for different people, and conversations around marriage and children, and in a totally different way. But when I was reading All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham, whose book has a ton of commentary on motherhood and expectations in a much darker, thrillery kind of a way, I feel like there's a very similar feeling about commentary on what it means to be a single childless woman in your 40s, and how some people take pity on that and how some people are envious of that. But I feel like Laurie is such a strong, just exciting, fun main character, and I just loved her so much. And I feel like there's such strength to her and there's such vulnerability to her at the same time. But there's so much amazing humor in this book, and Laurie and Nick's dynamic, I don't know what I'm doing with my fingers today, but their banter is so great. And I always think that Julia Whelan just elevates all of it so much. But this is definitely one of those books where I was laughing out loud at certain times, and I definitely, again, I'm like a crying bucket of puddle. I'm like a puddle of tears. I'm a puddle bucket. I don't even know what words I'm talking about today. I totally cried, but I loved it so much. So I'm very excited for anything else Linda Holmes writes, you guys. I think she's amazing. And I think if you're looking for a non-murdery book, but a book that's really moving and also is going to make you laugh big time, this would be a great one to pick up. The next book I want to talk about is The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentile. So this book was gifted to me by Janine back when I hit my 5,000 subscriber mark. Thank you, Janine. This is so wonderful. I'm sorry it took me so long to read it. You sent this to me in June of last year, but I didn't. Again, I feel like books find you when they're supposed to find you. So it found me and I found it and I absolutely loved it. So I wound up doing kind of a 50-50 reading it and listening to the audiobook. I'm going to get you guys my audiobook narrator here. This was narrated by Katherine Littrell, who I thought did a fantastic job on the audio narration. And it was one of those books where I just like wanted to be in it at all times. So I was. I read it super quickly. So I feel like this is one of those books where people either love it or just don't. I loved it. This book absolutely worked for me on all the fronts. And there could be multiple reasons for it, or again, I mean, just not every book is for everybody. But I do think there is an element, whether I misunderstood it or it falls into that like mismarketed bucket, which I feel like happens a lot. So this book opens at the Boston Public Library, and we have 4 strangers who are each doing their own thing in the reading room. And a woman's scream breaks out in the library. The security guards at the library tell everyone to stay put while they investigate, and these 4 strangers start to talk to each other. So in a very similar to One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus, not Catherine, Karen M. McManus, my understanding is that this book was a locked room. They were going to be in the library the entire time trying to figure out who was murdered, what happened. Obviously, everybody's a suspect because we're all in the library together. So much like the Karen McManus book, I thought like that whole book took place in detention, and I was super excited for it, but they get out of detention after the first chapter in that book. Like somebody dies in detention and then they all leave. So in this one, the security guards come back to the reading room. They're like, some kind of a prank. We don't know. Like, we're not finding everything. Go on your way. So I was like, oh, this book does not entirely take place in the Boston Public Library. Who knew? I didn't. So anyway, it wound up totally being fine once I realized it was sort of like a different book than what I was reading. But these 4 strangers wind up kind of going to grab a cup of coffee afterwards. They're bonded together by this, what was that scream? And our main character is a writer. One of the other guys in the library was a writer. And their interest is all piqued by this. And everyone's kind of wondering what just happened in the library. And then the next day, it comes out that a woman's body was later found. And of course, they're all like, we're going to Scooby Gang this and try and investigate and find out what happened. So, but it's not like Scooby-Doo, like kind of like a Veronica Mars, Buffy, like let's get the gang all together and figure out what happens because we were all there. So they all wind up being questioned by the police, everybody who was there at the time. And we get this sort of mix of investigation, and then at the same time, we're getting a book within a book. So we're getting letters between an author named Hannah and this guy, Leo, who lives in Boston. So this entire book is set in Boston. And Leo is a writer in Boston, and he is writing to Hannah, who was a writer in Australia, writing a book about a group of people who hear a woman scream at the Boston Public Library. And he is trying to help her make it authentic and talk about, you know, specific locations in Boston and where people would go and the names of different, you know, donut shops they could go to, or proximity of things and how they would get from, you know, I lived in Boston for over 10 years. Why can't I think of anything? How you would get from Copley Square over to Cambridge, and talking about the tea. And he's trying to help her make it, and the tea being the subway, not like spilling the tea. But he is trying to help her sort of Americanize her book because she's Australian. And this book takes place when the Panorama lockdown first started. So our author in Australia can't travel to the US to do her own research. So it turns out that the Woman in the Library book is the book within the book. And we get to see these letters interspersed between, and Leo is giving her critiques kind of on each chapter and what he thinks works and what he thinks doesn't work. And he's kind of giving his theories on who he thinks has done it in the book. And again, I don't know if I connected to this so much because I am a writer and I felt like the writing elements of it. So we have Hannah, who is the writer, and then her main character within her book is also a writer. So there's lots of writer discussions going on here. But I also thought the actual mystery of what happens to the woman in the library was really smart and well done. And I was guessing and I was theorizing, and I just needed to know. I just needed to know. I really liked these characters. So our main character in the book within the book is a woman named Freddie. She is part of a writing program in Boston, so we get that whole aspect of her life as well. And I just thought it was really well done. And I am, of course, a sucker for anything set in Boston, and I was feeling super just sentimental and fuzzy about all of the references to things and the locations, which I just knew. And the last place I lived was in Back Bay, so like that whole part of Boston has always been a fave of mine, and it just felt so sentimental and wonderful. But I really thought the mystery was well done. I know some people had said how they didn't feel like the letters of sort of the book within the book were necessary. I felt that it really worked, and I also found it really interesting. So there's an author's note at the end, kind of a conversation with the author, which I have found pop up more and more in books, and I love it. And I'm, again, just totally down for all of that insight of like where people get their ideas and sort of what inspired their books and what's important to them to include in their books, or messaging or anything like that. But Sulori Gentile was talking about how she herself lives in Australia, and she has a friend who lives in the US who was helping her in that very same way. So she wanted to do sort of her own twist on it. So sort of this real life exchange and partnership that she had with a fellow writer in the US was partially the inspiration for it. So I love how she took that and then kind of did her own thing with it. And I just loved it. I really thought it was well done. It was well written. I really enjoyed her writing, and I definitely am excited to read more from her. I just really loved it. I really did. There's just so many things about it. So many of them are spoilery, I feel like. But the structure worked for me, and then some of the other things that I like from in terms of like reveals and clues and red herrings are obviously all giveaways, so I can't talk about it. But I really love how she did it and how she created the story. And I really loved Freddie and the characters. So I was wholly invested, and I feel like I was suspicious the way you were supposed to be of things, and I went down the wrong paths like one is supposed to. And I just thought it was great. I thought it was absolutely great. So I highly recommend this. And again, I did like a 50-50. I thought the audiobook was really great. So maybe that's a good entryway. That's not a word. Entryway in for you, or maybe the book is. But I thought it was amazing, and I'm excited to read more from her. So yay. 3 cheers for me for this book. So thank you again, Janine, for sending it to me. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Even though it wasn't a locked room mystery in the Boston Public Library, I still thought it was just perfect. The next book I did on audio, and this is A Small Affair by Flora Collins, and this was read by Teri Schnaubelt. And this is one of those books that wasn't on my radar at all, because I'm human and I miss things, and I can't believe I missed this book. But it popped up, I feel like within hours of each other, it seemed like, on Abby from Crime by the Book's Instagram and Gare from Gare Indeed Reads, and they both were raving about just what a great, dark, psychological, twisty thriller this was. And I was like, how did I miss this? And I need to read this immediately. So I checked, my library had it, and I read it, and I binged it, and I loved it. So this definitely, I feel like Gare had said it went like darker and twistier than he expected it to. That's basically what I was like, I am absolutely reading this right now. So this is a story about a young woman, and Vera is ruthlessly ambitious and beautiful, and she knows how to get exactly what she wants, no matter who stands in the way. So her life has been torn apart because her very wealthy ex-lover is found dead along with his wife, which Vera didn't know he still had. He told her he was divorced. Garbage. Men are garbage in these books, and I love it. So she winds up meeting him on a dating app, and she thinks just like he's the best. He's the absolute best. She has a great job in fashion. She's an influencer. She's got a huge following on Instagram, and she is just sort of living her best life in New York City. And then, that happens, and she gets pulled into this murder as the mistress. She is suspected of things. Her name is dragged through the mud. She loses her job, and like her entire life just falls apart. So we meet her a year later, and she is kind of coming out of the self-pity cocoon. She is dusting herself off to start again, and she winds up getting invited to a memorial for the dead wife of her dead ex-lover. And she is kind of curious but hesitant, but her best friend convinces her to go, and they wind up going, and she just gets pulled into this entire family. So this is one of those books that I feel like it's very hard to discuss the premise without talking about too much. We get multiple POVs, we get multiple timelines, you get a lot of dark, salacious behavior, you get some great NYC sort of rich people behaving badly vibes. You already know things don't end well at the beginning for the ex-lover and his dead wife. And the slow peeling of the onion of who these people really are and what led to that and who did it and why they did it. And I just thought it was so wonderful how it was done. And it's definitely in the dark and messed up universe, which I absolutely loved. It was such a bingeable read, and Gare nailed it. It was so much darker and twistier than I expected. So again, I knew that a little bit going in, but it still managed to feel really dark and messed up. But I just love that ambition and stopping at nothing, and how completely just dark and devious and horrible these people can be in these books. And I just, for some reason, love being in their worlds while they do all the dark and messed up things. So I think I said this earlier when I was talking about The Housemaid Secret. This was like definitely the dark book that I was referencing, and I really enjoyed it. So I am definitely looking forward to reading some more Flora Collins. I am very happy that Abby and Gare talked about this book because I thought it was absolutely great. And it's just, again, one of these books about like how far will you go in a situation, and I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. So again, if you're looking for a dark, messed up, bingeable read, I highly recommend this one. And again, I did it all on audio, and the audio was fantastic, so I can only I'm sure the physical book is great too, but the audio was amazing. So there you go. And then the last book I read is Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun by El Casamano. So I was lucky enough to get an audio arc of this from Macmillan Audio. So I have mentioned in previous videos, I'm a St. Martin's partner, St. Martin's influencer. So was very excited to get an arc of this. I also got the e-arc via NetGalley, so I appreciate having the option of 2 different ways to read this. And I mostly listened to the audiobook of this, but I did dip into a little bit of the physical book because, again, I just wanted to be in it at all times. So the audiobook was read by Angela Dawe, and this is the 3rd book in the Finley Donovan series. So I don't want to talk too much about plot because that's just rude if you haven't read the books yet. But I absolutely love this series. So Finley Donovan is killing it as the 1st book in the series, and this is about a woman named Finley Donovan. She is a newly divorced single mom. She is raising 2 very young children. Her husband left her for the realtor. So similar to In a Small Affair when I was saying that men in these books are garbage, and Finley's husband is garbage as well. And he lives down the street so he can be close to the kids. But Finley is a struggling thriller writer, and she is just trying to keep it all together. So her husband has also fired the nanny, whose name is Vero, and Finley is just like at the edge of her rope. So when the 1st book opens, she is having lunch with her agent at a Panera. It's busy, it's lunchtime, and she's talking to her agent about the plot of her new mystery novel. And someone overhears the conversation and mistakes Finley for a contract killer and offers her a whole lot of money to murder her husband. And Finley's very much like, no, you kind of misunderstood me. But yes, I could really use the money. But like, no, I can't like kill somebody. Can I? And it's definitely like hijinks ensue. So Finley winds up rehiring her amazing nanny Vero, and Vero and Finley have this amazing relationship that continues to grow through the books. And it's definitely by far, I feel like, my favorite part of the series. So I enjoy the mystery, I enjoy the humor, I enjoy the little snippets and dabbling of romance. But to me, that friendship between the 2 women is the cornerstone of these books and is definitely kind of like the true romance in a very Thelma and Louise type of a way. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's like Lucy and Ethel meets Linda Cardellini and Christina Applegate in Dead to Me now meets Thelma and Louise. And I just love it because I feel like the more hijinks they get into and the stronger their bond gets, you just start to get this development of these friendships, or development of this friendship that I absolutely love. So I loved the 1st book, like absolutely loved it, totally obsessed. I very much enjoyed book number 2. Book number 3 to me was another absolute love. Like I feel the same way about book 3 as I did book number 1. And we get, again, more of these characters. We get more crazy hijinks that happen. We get a slight change of scene, which is all I'm going to tell you. And I just love how these ladies get themselves in and out of so much trouble. And I just love how they are just so freaking funny when they're together. And I just feel like the humor of this book is so on point. The writing is really great. The relationships are so wonderful between the different characters. And all in, like, these 3 books take place over a very short amount of time. And I just love how just the pages keep turning, and I don't know, I feel like it's very hard for me to explain like that. It's like that thing that you can't quite explain about why this book just completely resonated so much with me and why I just loved it so much, but it was funny. Again, the audiobook was tremendous, and I just love these ladies so much, and I love to continue to see them on their journey. So I've heard a rumor that there is a 4th and final book in the series. I don't know if that's true or not, that it's the final, but there is going to be a 4th book, which is very exciting. And I feel like she definitely does an amazing job, El Casamano, of giving you answers and giving you everything you need in a book, but also leaving you wanting a little bit more. So again, I feel like it's like doors closed, windows open at the end of each one of her books, and I'm all invested. So I love the familiar characters that we know and love. I love the introduction of some new characters. And I just think she does a really smart job, again, about how she sprinkles in the clues, how she misdirects you, how things are solved, how it feels very plausible in a lot of ways. And I'm just here for it. I'm just absolutely here for it. And while I myself am not a mother of 2 very young children, I do think she does an amazing job of articulating and presenting what that's like, and just knowing what I know from friends of mine and having been around friends when they are with their small children and being on a vacation with my friends and they have little kids. I feel like she does a great job showing the challenges of being a mom and just sort of the chaos that these kids can create and sort of that added chaos that they can create. And it's just very funny and it brings a lot of levity to it. And I think the audiobook narrator did a great job with Finley's daughter in this book too, and it just had me completely cracking up. It really, really did. So huge fan of this series if you haven't already read it, and if you haven't picked up this book yet and you're already in the series, I just highly recommend it. I thought it was really, really well done, and I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. So there you have it, all in 12 books in January, like a completely banner month for me, and I just had such a great time with it. So again, I was leaning pretty heavy into some pretty recent releases, which has been fun, and just continuing some series and discovering some new authors and being completely satisfied with recommendations I took from other people. And I don't know, again, stars aligned, and I just had a really good reading month and I'm excited about it. So far, we're only a couple days into February, but it's so far so good. Things are going well. So I'll keep you guys posted, but I would love to hear what you read in January, if you had a favorite book of the month, if you just, anything, you just had a book you want to talk about February, but let me know. And let me know if you read any of these, and we can just chit chat down below. So thank you guys so much for watching and for being here, and I will see you guys in another video really soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.